Well, good day to you. Welcome back to the channel. Hey, this is episode 300 of the Typewriter Video Series. I couldn't have believed that when I started this thing that it would go to 300 episodes at least, but anyways, here we are. I had been thinking a few weeks ago about doing some kind of, I don't know, philosophical retrospective on the whole series or whatever, but I think this is going to be episode 300 because I got a package in the mail the other day. Just in time for episode 300. What is it? It's a Platen returned from J.J. Short with fresh rubber, and it goes to this Royal Mercury. Stay tuned. In some way, this typewriter does kind of relate to this whole typewriter series, because if you go all the way back to the start of my interest in typewriters and the early years of the typosphere, I think it was around 2007, maybe 2006. I don't have a firm grasp on the date. I got my first Royal Mercury. I had actually bought a Adler, a medium-sized portable from John Lewis in the early aughts. I used it for a few years, wasn't super happy with it for some reason. I can't remember why now. But I went back to his shop and I saw the Royal Mercury and I bought it. And that became my first real typewriter that I collected, and I used it for years, especially on vacations, going to Southern California, sitting on the beach, typing with it. Did a lot of early blog articles on it. But in 2018, I found another Royal Mercury at the Antique Specialty Mall here in Albuquerque. This one was dated 1971. My first Royal Mercury was 1972. It has a different style of body, a little actually nicer, I think, than the first Royal Mercury that's a year later. This one has a really nice low profile, kind of a straight look to the ribbon cover. The later body style, it kind of slopes up a little bit, like it wedges up, and then the later one has some kind of brown trim on the front, where this one has this kind of dark gray, nice modernist kind of lines here with the Royal Lytton logo. And this one actually had the plastic shipping fixture that came into the segment here, and also the vinyl sleeve that protects the carriage return lever and shipping. So these were like original fixtures that came with the machine when they were new. So I was really excited to get this machine, but it has the same typeface as the first Royal Mercury I had, and so I figured it was kind of redundant. So after a while, I ended up finding a new home for that first Royal Mercury, and this is my Royal Mercury now that I'm left with. But it had a rock-hard Platen. I had been trying to work on this for a while to get the Platen off, and the reason why it was such a challenge is because the left-hand Platen knob is left-hand threaded, and you have to unscrew the Platen knob in order to get the knob off and to disconnect it and get the Platen off. It was super tight, and I ended up having to buy a set of rubber strap wrenches in order to get a handle on that plastic knob without damaging it, and getting the other strap wrench, the rubber strap, underneath the Platen far enough that I could immobilize the Platen with one wrench and then break loose the knob with the other. I was able finally to get the knob off, thanks to Ted Monk, by the way, who sent me a scan of one page of the Royal Mercury service manual that showed how to take it apart and put it back together. Anyways, thank you, Ted, and if you're interested, he sells manuals on the typewriter repair Bibles online. Look for those on Lulu, I believe. So anyways, I hastily took the Platen out and shipped it off to J.J. Short, forgetting, of course, to videotape the whole disassembly procedure. Unfortunately, I did take some still photos that we can refer to on my phone. I took some photos just to see how everything goes back together. So anyways, all that to say, there's a freshly resurfaced Platen. There is a Royal Mercury typewriter waiting to receive the Platen. Let's do this. Well, here's the reprint from the service manual that Ted sent me, and he typed a note up here that no, this procedure requires you to also hold the Platen itself from turning, which is almost impossible to do successfully, he writes, without, of course, having a second set of strap wrenches that you can try to wrap around the Platen. Anyways, so to remove the Platen, you remove the right cylinder knob, right, by loosening the two set screws right here. And then remove the left cylinder knob by turning it clockwise, right, left-hand thread. Important to note, the left cylinder knob has a left-hand thread and is extremely tight. They even tell you it's extremely tight. Therefore, it is necessary to protect the left cylinder knob with a thick, soft cloth while using a pair of pliers to crack the thread loose. Well, it's a little harder than that, actually, sometimes. Then remove the line space feed pawl fulcrum screw, which is number 5, which is actually right here, right? And the spring 4 and the feed pawl 3. So the spring is underneath that screw, and number 3 is the pawl itself, which I actually have back in the machine here. So there is this little sprocket right here that is the line feed sprocket, and I've put all of that back together, by the way, with a tie wrap here, a cable tie, in order to keep the alignment roughly the same, so when I put it back in, it'll hopefully go in with minimal fuss and everything. I thought it would be a good idea to clean up the feed rollers before we try putting the platen back in. And this is another area that you might notice on a lot of typewriters. It gets really dirty, but on this typewriter, it was extremely clean, almost like it had never been used. There was almost no residue at all in the paper pan here. The feed rollers are nice and soft, and there's just a couple little white specks from maybe correction tape or whatever, but there's 6 little rollers, so I'm going to clean them with some alcohol, and then we can get around to replacing the platen, installing it. And this was another reason why I got this typewriter, not just as a redundant machine, but it was essentially unused, I think. If you look at the condition of these rollers, it's really remarkable. And the rubber was in good shape on these rollers, soft and not deformed or anything like that, no flat spots. So it kind of looked to me like this machine had very little use. So tear open this package. Right platen knob goes here, and the set screws on the knob just clamp down on this round shaft, and then the left platen knob is the left-hand threaded one that the knob threads onto. Well, okay, so I had put a cable tie in here to hold the little arm and the sprocket together. So I had an idea of how this goes back together. Okay, the sprocket pulls out like that. And one thing that I did not pay attention to, and you will notice now, is that the teeth have a certain angle to them. And I actually don't know which way it goes back in, except there is a faint wear mark along the inside hole on one side, and the other side doesn't have that mark. It actually has more of a mark around the periphery. So that might be a clue as to which way this goes in, because that's certainly going to affect the operation of it. So as I look at the left end of the platen, where the threaded shaft is, I see that there is a raised ridge along here that lines up with the score marks along the edge of that sprocket. So that looks like that sprocket is going to go like that. Okay, so now I'm going to take off this screw with a long name, and there's this little spring underneath it like that, and that holds on that arm. And then you might notice down here is a spring-loaded roller, and that's the roller that engages the sprocket on the platen itself. So now we're looking from the back of the machine. This is the right-hand platen knob bracket, and the shaft goes through like that, and the left-hand side of the roll of the platen sits down like that in this slot, but we have to attach the roller or the sprocket in there. Now there's one thing I need to show you. On the left platen knob there is a little shoulder, focus, and that shoulder centers itself in the hole in the middle of that sprocket. That's what locates it properly. So what I'm doing is pushing the platen in toward the back so the sprocket is centered more. It's forcing the sprocket against that spring-loaded roller. And now what you have to do is center the sprocket onto the shoulder in the middle of that knob. And you have to kind of just eyeball it. So it goes in there like that. Okay, that sounds good. I'm just verifying that I've got this bracket in properly. There is a little bump on the inside surface right here. And it looks like that rides on the edge of the sprocket. So it's supposed to ride like that, I guess. And then I have to push in the carriage return lever far enough to line the hole up here. And then get the spring and screw started. Well, I think this is the way it goes. I think I actually had it in right. I was just trying to verify it. So it pivots on this shoulder screw. There's a spring that keeps the plate kind of pushed down against the joint of the carriage return lever. And what's supposed to happen here, as I draw focus to the front, is this bent arm is what actually engages the sprocket wheel to do the line spacing like that. So this arm here has to float. It has to pivot back here at the screw, and it has to kind of move back and forth, and this curved arm sort of rides in between the sprocket and this left carriage frame. So it just kind of has to float like that, and that's what it does. So it's in there properly, and all of our positions work. So let's start with the very back position. Should be the carriage lock, and it is. And then the next position is single line spacing, and so that should be 2 clicks. It's a half space machine. Okay, the middle next position forward should be 1.5 line spacing, which is 3 clicks. Right, but the next forward position should be double line spacing, which should be 4 half clicks. Okay, and then all the way forward is disconnects the ratcheting entirely. So you have your freewheeling variable. So I should mention here that before I got the strap wrenches, I tried to take off this knob by wrapping some rags around it like the service manual suggested and using some pliers, but I ended up making this stress mark on the plastic knob, and that's where I stopped and decided I needed a better way. And for certain, the strap wrench is the way to go. So this kit I bought off Amazon had a small size or thin strap wrench, and then it had a wider strap wrench, and it uses a rubber belt and some jaws here that grip when you wrap it around something. You want to have the jaws here, the serrations, where in the direction you turn it, this rubber thing is going to be pushed against that. I'm going to be turning it clockwise to loosen. You had to put it on like this. And then you tighten the rubber jaw, and then you can, if you immobilize the platen with the other strap wrench, you can turn it to break it loose like that, like I just did. So this right-hand knob has 2 set screws. There are no flats on the shaft, and you want to make sure the platen is pushed all the way to the right as far as it'll go, so its shoulder in here is up against the right frame of the carriage. And then we will tighten both screws nice and tight. Wow, looks pretty decent. Yes, indeed, a nice imprint, and it doesn't sound real hard and loud anymore. This Royal Mercury typewriter, to me, kind of functions like a time machine of sorts. It was made in 1971, and I started thinking, what was going on in 1971 in my life? And I remembered that was the year that I had my appendix rupture and get infected. It was late May of 71. I was just finishing my 8th grade year of junior high school, and I got a bad stomach flu or stomach infection. Didn't know really what was going on at the time. Got worse and worse. The pain got worse and worse. And then eventually my dad took me to the hospital, and it turned out that my appendix had ruptured and gotten badly infected. And the doctor who operated on me was the same doctor who brought me into this world, Dr. Goddard. If that name is familiar to you, it's because he was a relative of the rocket pioneer, Dr. Goddard, who was launching those early liquid-fueled rockets in the desert outside of Roswell, New Mexico. Yes, that Roswell, New Mexico. So my dad liked Loveless Clinic, which is where Dr. Goddard was working at, because it was close to the base, to Sandia Base, where my dad worked for the Defense Nuclear Agency. And I didn't realize the connection until I was putting this video together, but this typewriter that I have, made in 1971, was the same year that I was operated on by Dr. Goddard, who examined the Mercury 7 astronauts in the early 1960s at Loveless Clinic in Albuquerque. So the Mercury 7 astronauts in the early 1960s, Dr. Goddard, my operation in 1971, the same year this typewriter is made. That's just one of those little connection things that I always find kind of interesting. Well, here we are out in the patio. It's a little cloudy day, and there's a little bit of noise from the neighbors, but that's what Sunday in the suburbs is all about, I suppose. I guess I got myself some typing to do. I got what's essentially a new typewriter for all intents and purposes. I mean, it's probably the closest thing you can get to a new typewriter that was made in 1971. What is today, the 20th? Yes, and one of the things I love about this Royal Mercury, and actually both of them that I've owned, the imprint is so nice. Even, straight, well aligned, just imprints really well. This one I think was already better than the other one before the new Platen. It's just better now altogether. Okay, this is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to put this on 1.5 line spacing. And I guess I'm going to stay out here and do some typing, and I'll let you guys go. But I thank you for staying with me and watching me replace the Platen, get everything set up on that left-hand carriage with the line spacing mechanism. Well, looky here. This is like a time machine. Yes, it's like going back in time to 1971. You can't get much more pristine of a typewriter than this. Well, I hope you have very good luck and good fortune and a lot of fun with your typewriters and your creativity. And as always, stay well. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.